3 years into our marriage, Shwezhengju and I had become the most notorious bickering couple in the capital. He resented me for forcing him into marriage and trapping him in the princess mansion. I resented him for abandoning his dignity all those years ago just to save the woman he loved. During one of our explosive quarrels, Shwezhengju flipped the table in a fit of rage, then froze abruptly. "Your Highness, you have grey hair." I stared at the exhausted woman in the mirror and suddenly felt how pathetic my life had become. That night, I set a raging fire that consumed me entirely. When I opened my eyes again, I had somehow returned to the day my imperial brother bestowed Shwezhengju upon me as my husband. The young Shwezhengju did not yet know how to hide his emotions, his face twisted with anger. Sympathetic glances were cast his way from all around. It seemed everyone took it for granted that I would have no one but him. So when Shwezhengju knelt before me in public, casting aside all his pride, I let out a sudden laugh. "I might toy with you, but I will never take you as my consort." The noise in the hall died instantly. Countless eyes fixed on Shwezhengju, kneeling on the floor, his straight spine bent under the weight of those tangible, mocking gazes, the look of disbelief still lingering on his face. My imperial brother stared in shock, asking again, "You do not want him?" After returning from my marriage alliance in the distant desert, my brother had felt indebted to me. Today, he had gathered all the finest young men in the capital during the Shangxi festival for me to choose from. For 10 years, Shwezhengju had been the obsession of my girlhood. Everyone simply assumed I would pick him. He had passed the imperial examination as a youth, riding the crest of success. Now, he held the position of junior tutor to the crown prince. Judging solely by his future prospects, I ought to have chosen him, yet the sight of his face dragged my thoughts back to every night in my past life when we argued until we had no words left, leaving me only with exhaustion. Thus, I said firmly and resolutely, "I can choose anyone except Shwezhengju." As soon as the words left my mouth, the color drained from Shwezhengju's face. He was far too proud to bear such humiliation. His earlier refusal to submit had now turned into a pitiful farce of unrequited affection. He stared at me intensely. "Your Highness, what do you mean by this?" I did not answer him. Instead, my gaze wandered around the hall, finally settling on a young man in the corner. As if sensing my stare, he suddenly looked up and met my eyes, his face flushing bright red from the tips of his ears down to his neck. For a moment, I could not name the emotion stirring in my heart. Only a faint sense of guilt creeping in. Logically speaking, the Cheng family was not prominent enough to attend today's feast, but I had learned in my past life that Cheng Yuanshu had given away his most cherished possession just for a chance to see me. Later, he had turned down a promising official career to become a lowly advisor under me. Until his dying breath, he was the only one who had braved the flames of the burning mansion to die alongside me. I stood up and walked toward him. Ignoring his stunned gaze, holding out my hand, under the watchful eyes of everyone present, I asked softly, "Will you enter the princess mansion and become my consort, Xu Shanyan's husband?" The flush on Cheng Yuanshu's face spread even further up his neck, his face bright red with embarrassment. He stood up flattered and surprised, placing his hand in mine before instinctively trying to pull it back, but I tightened my grip firmly before he could withdraw it. Ever since our eyes had met, Cheng Yuanshu had been flustered, as if trapped in a dream. Only now did he manage to compose himself slightly. Though still blushing, his voice was steady and resolute. I am willing. Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Nanyang, is both brave and noble, a true golden branch and jade leaf. To earn your favor is the greatest honor of my 3 lifetimes. My imperial brother was amused by his earnest response and immediately bestowed his blessing upon our marriage. As I returned to my seat, I saw Shwezhengju's back stiffen completely. Stuck in an awkward predicament, he knelt frozen in the middle of the hall, looking up at me with humiliation in his eyes. I smiled faintly. "Master Shwe, please rise. This princess is not an unreasonable person. It is simply that you knelt too quickly, leaving me no chance to tell you who I had chosen as my consort. Since we were never meant to be, I would not have the slightest entanglement with him in this life. From now on, men would marry and women would wed, and we would have nothing more to do with each other." Shwezhengju's face turned ashen. After a long while, he said hoarsely, "It was this humble minister's presumption. Thank you for your magnanimity, Your Highness. Perhaps the weight of my past life was too heavy to bear. On the first night after my rebirth, I came down with a high fever. In my delirium, I could not tell the present from the past. I suddenly remembered what had happened before my marriage alliance in my previous life. Shui Zhengju had been the first Zhuangyuan top scorer in the imperial examination during the Chongguang era after my imperial brother ascended the throne. Later, he entered the Imperial Academy, clearly on the path to greater heights. I had enrolled in the Imperial Academy at just 14 years old, alongside Princess Kangol, my half-sister who was 2 years older than me. We attended classes together. The Imperial Academy was full of young men of distinguished birth and handsome looks, yet none shone brighter than Shui Zhengju. He had claimed the top scorer's title at barely 20 years old. In the prime of his youth, dressed in a deep indigo robe, he stood tall and elegant in the hall. Radiating the confidence of success, he bowed slightly to me. "Your humble servant Shui Zhengju greets Your Highness." Under the pear blossom tree, his amber eyes sparkled with light. From that moment on, Shui Zhengju became the untouchable moon in my memories. The Imperial Academy was filled with the cream of the crop, but I cherished him deeply. I studied diligently under his guidance, determined not to trouble him with my inadequacies. Even my imperial brother had marveled. Shanyang has never been one for books. It seems Master Shui's scholarship rivals that of the greatest scholars, to inspire such eagerness to learn in both of my younger sisters. A girl's secret crush is like the last handful of snow in winter. I hid it where no one could see, treasuring it quietly alone. Yet often, what we think is deeply hidden is plain for all to see. Even when held carefully in the palm of one's hand, it will eventually melt away. My literary talent was much praised among the common people. After reviewing my schoolwork, Shui Zhengju had also complimented me. "Her Royal Highness the Princess of Nanyang's writing is excellent. His Majesty has been smiling because of you these past few days, and this humble servant has also benefited from your light." He had given me a vermilion jade brush. Under the sunlight, the brush body was translucent, with impurities inside that faintly resembled a swimming koi fish. My heart fluttered with joy as I reached out to take it. My fingers brushed against his cool fingertips, sending a jolt through my heart so strong I almost dropped the brush. Shui Zhengju steadied my hand with his. His smile as usual. "Be careful, Your Highness." By the time I returned to my seat, my heart was pounding wildly like a drum. After class ended, however, Princess Kangol did not look happy at all. We had never gotten along well. Seeing her glare at me, I had no desire to argue with her. After we parted ways, I remembered I needed to consult an ancient book for my studies and turned back to the Imperial Library. I never expected to run into Shui Zhengju there. He was walking between the bookshelves, seemingly searching for something. I was about to call out to him. A graceful figure stepped forward first, her voice bright and warm like the scorching sun. "Master Shui." It was Kangol. I watched helplessly as Shui Zhengju stepped back in surprise, a rare look of fluster on his face. The books he was holding slipped from his hands and fell to the ground. Kangol smiled and bent down to help him pick them up. Their fingers brushed, and Shui Zhengju pulled his hand back with a tremble, his breathing turning unsteady. "Why didn't you come today? Didn't you promise to teach me to observe the stars and recognize the 28 mansions?" Master Shui, her lively, passionate demeanor melted the last handful of snow I had cherished so carefully in my heart. I did not listen to another word they said after that. My heart felt as if it had been soaked in overly pickled plums, first sour, then lingering bitterly. So it turned out that he was not always calm and composed. He only grew flustered when facing the woman he loved, just as I grew flustered in the presence of Shui Zhengju, just as Shui Zhengju grew flustered in the presence of Kangol. Afterward, I found out many things I had not known before, belatedly. During all those days when I had restrained myself and acted with propriety, Kangol had been like a blazing fire, capturing all of Shui Zhengju's attention. While I had been too cautious to dare offend him, they had watched the rain together and brewed tea, listening quietly to the dripping water clock. On the night when all my fantasies had shattered into pieces, they had also drunk wine together and discussed poetry. painting bamboo with ink. From then on, I never crossed the line again, becoming the quietest and most well-behaved student in the Imperial Academy. Until I turned 17, the court fell into turmoil. The northern desert had been repeatedly raiding our borders. Their army was strong and well-equipped, and they had a new, young and ambitious ruler. My imperial brother began to work day and night, losing sleep as he and his ministers tried every possible solution. But to no avail. The northern desert made an arrogant demand. They wanted to marry a princess of our dynasty. It was a thunderstorm night. I had just stepped into the hall of diligent governance when an ink stone crashed to the ground at my feet with a loud bang. Blood streamed down from a cut on Shuizhengju's forehead. My imperial brother roared with rage. Shuizhengju, how dare you? How dare you help Kangol leave the palace without permission? If she is not found, you will pay with your life 1,000 times over. Kangol had run away. By the time I learned the news, she had already eloped with her lover and fled the imperial city. The irony was that I loved Shuizhengju. Shuizhengju loved Kangol. Yet Kangol had only been kind to him because his face bore a faint resemblance to her own younger brother. Now that her brother had returned triumphant from the battlefield, Shuizhengju had endured the pain of letting go of his own love, defying the imperial family to help Kangol escape. The only remaining princess was me. The thunder that night was deafeningly loud. I knew Kangol would never come back. Internal strife and external threats weighed heavily on our dynasty. The atmosphere in the hall was deathly cold and silent. Imperial brother, I said, I am your blood sister. Nurtured by our dynasty for many years, now it is time for me to repay the countless people of our land. Let me go. Shuizhengju closed his eyes dejectedly, a look of regret crossing his face. Your Highness. My imperial brother slapped him hard across the face. The pain was evident on Shuizhengju's face. Kangol is not my blood sister, but I never once thought of sending either her or Nanyang away for a marriage alliance. I will lead the army personally into battle. Heaven will not let my great cause perish. But Kangol had fled, and rumors spread like wildfire among the people. Everyone feared death. Thus, scholars and officials knelt outside the palace gates, urging the emperor to accept the northern desert's demands. The arrow was already on the string. There was no turning back. If I refused to go, even if the emperor led the army himself, he would be branded as a warmonger who cared nothing for the lives of his people. Shuizhengju had played an excellent game of chess, ultimately saving Kangol, but in doing so, he had unexpectedly blocked the last path of survival for me. After that, I traveled far to the northern desert to fulfill the marriage alliance. I did not return to my homeland until I was 27 years old. After pacifying the northern desert, 10 years had passed, wearing away my spirit and changing me beyond recognition. In my past life, at this very feast, my personality had long since faded from what it once was. Seeing Shuizhengju's face unchanged, I had been overwhelmed by the pain and suffering of those years, filled with hatred and rage. Thus, I had forced Shuizhengju to submit, trapping him in the Nanyang Princess Mansion and destroying his promising official career. The past had become a tangled mess of threads impossible to unravel. Love and hate, gratitude and resentment had long since turned to frost on the ground. From then on, we became a pair of bitter lovers, destined to bicker and resent each other until death did us part. During my illness, Cheng Yuanshu sent me a great many things. When my maids invited him inside, he looked as if he were facing a formidable enemy. I draped a robe over my shoulders and leaned against the corridor pillar, finding his flustered manner rather amusing. 10 years of hardship in the northern desert had left me with barely half a life. To return home and savor even a moment of peace was already a blessing from the heavens. What reputation could I possibly still have left to speak of? He stood some distance away from me, but upon catching sight of my expression, he suddenly spoke earnestly. Your Highness is a hero to all under heaven. Those who achieve great deeds have never been remembered for their reputations alone, but for their actions. I froze for quite a while before bursting into sudden laughter. In this world, there were those who sneered at my wanderings and tribulations, yet there were also those who remembered my journey to the distant desert alone, hailing me as a hero. It was high time I started living a life for myself. Knowing I bore him no ill will, and being my betrothed consort in name from that day onward. Cheng Yuanshu began to visit me often. Meanwhile, in the capital, ever since that feast, gossip had been spreading like wildfire. Before I could even open my mouth, Xue Zhengju had been the first to beg me not to choose him. In my past life, I had insisted on forcing him into the marriage, enduring endless mockery. During our quarrels, he had never missed a chance to throw this incident in my face to hurt me. Yet now that I had let him go, he was not happy about it. My imperial brother doted on me, summoning me to the palace to keep him company from time to time. One evening, after finishing dinner at the palace, I ran into Xue Zhengju head-on as I was leaving. Instead of stepping aside, he walked toward me, holding a lantern in his hand. Clearly, the gossip had been keeping him up at night. Dark circles hung under his eyes as he hesitated, asking, "Your Highness hates me. You deliberately humiliated me that day. Have you had your fill of revenge now?" I stared at him coldly. Where did my hatred even stem from? When the cause and effect did not befall himself, Xue Zhengju always acted as if those years had been a trivial matter that could be brushed aside with a mere release of anger, as if all grievances would vanish just like that. If you still have anger to vent, direct it all at me. But choosing a consort is a matter that will affect your entire life. The Cheng boy is of low birth, he is not worthy of your highness, and he is by no means a good match. I laughed in exasperation. When I had chosen him, he had been furious, questioning me why I would not choose the gentle-natured Cheng Yuanshu instead of entangling myself with him for years if I only wanted to suffer. Now that I had chosen Cheng Yuanshu, he had the audacity to speak to me in the tone of a lecturing elder, claiming Cheng Yuanshu was not a good match. I finally saw him for what he truly was. Xue Zhengju did not care who I chose as my consort, he was simply despicable. I moved closer to him, so close that even the candle flame in his hand flickered slightly. Xue Zhengju's breath hitched. He did not step back, only staring at me fixedly, as if waiting for something. I took the lantern from his hand and said coldly, "Is this what you were waiting for?" Before Xue Zhengju could regain his senses, I raised my hand without hesitation and slapped him hard across the face. The force of the slap turned his head to the side. He seemed utterly stunned by the blow. His eyes wide with disbelief, he hesitated for a moment, then stepped back, lifted his robe, and knelt down on the ground. "I do not know what I have done to anger your highness. I have been trapped in that desolate place for a full 10 years, enduring unspeakable suffering. And now you dare to publicly humiliate me at the feast, only to come here afterward with these false, hypocritical words of advice, a few trivial sentences. And suddenly all those years of pain and hardship were supposed to be forgotten." I stared into his eyes, grabbed the collar of his robe tightly, and ground out the words through gritted teeth. "All those years ago, I was the one who debased myself, falling in love with a selfish, hypocritical scoundrel. It was entirely my own fault, but Xue Zhengju, I do not owe you anything. It was you who ruined half my life, condemning me to wander in exile. If you ever dare to come in front of me again and spout this nonsense, I will kill both you and Kangol." He was shocked by my words, staring at me in disbelief. "Princess Kangol is your elder sister. She is innocent." I laughed bitterly in anger. Was it not she who eloped with her lover, letting all the gossip fall on me? Was it not she who colluded with you to force imperial brother to send me away for the marriage alliance? Xue Zhengju fell silent, rendered speechless. I threw the lantern hard at his feet, then turned and walked away without looking back. From that day onward, I never asked about Xue Zhengju again. Spring had just passed, and it was the transition period between spring and summer. The hunting ground was already bustling with activity early on. My imperial brother was quite interested and asked me to accompany him. Cheng Yuanshu was mounted on his horse, swapping his usual restrained wide-sleeved robes for a riding outfit that accentuated his broad shoulders and narrow waist, a fine physique honed by regular exercise. He had lost his mother at a young age and had been suppressed by his stepmother for many years. Usually quiet and unassuming, he had always seemed somewhat dull and lackluster. But now, he was a completely different person. His hair was tied up high with an ornate hairpin, his eyes sparkled as he looked at me. The corners of his eyes and mouth curved into an undisguisable smile. Spotting me from afar, He galloped over, "Your Highness." His loud greeting shocked everyone in the hunting ground, drawing their gazes. They thought he was being a little too exuberant, but Cheng Yuanshu paid them no mind, rushing straight to me. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his face glowing with excitement. "I just hunted a rabbit in the hunting ground. I'll have someone send it to the princess mansion tonight." A rabbit was nothing out of the ordinary, but the thought behind it was rare and precious. His bright, lively eyes were a far cry from the dead, cold look he had worn in my past life. A soft spot melted in my heart, and I held out a handkerchief to him. Cheng Yuanshu was still chattering away when his eyes suddenly widened, and he stumbled over his words. "Ah, a handkerchief from your highness." He struggled to say a complete sentence. Reaching out his hand several times only to awkwardly pull it back again, he was so full of life and vitality. The Nanyang Princess Mansion had always seemed shrouded in a dull, grey hue, filled with endless quarrels and shattered bowls and plates that had been its entire existence. In my past life, Cheng Yuanshu, as my advisor, had been a man of few words, yet every time he saw me looking haggard and worn down, he could not help but say, "Your Highness, if you are unhappy, you should divorce him." But trapped by hatred, I had always refused, preferring to drag Shuizhengju down with me to eternal unrest even if it meant my own death. Thus, in my memories, Cheng Yuanshu had also been covered in a layer of lifeless dust, though in the prime of his life, he had seemed as if he were already declining into old age, so much so that seeing him here, alive and kicking in front of me, felt like a lifetime away. He was my betrothed consort after all. There was no harm in him accepting the handkerchief. I smiled faintly, intending to place the handkerchief in his hand. Cheng Yuanshu had just lifted his hand when an arrow shot out from nowhere, slicing through the air with a sharp whistling sound and piercing the handkerchief in my hand. The arrow brushed past my ear, leaving a faint, stinging sensation in its wake. I spun around in shock and anger. There, standing on the hillside not far away, was a young man dressed in red, looking down at me from a height. The bowstring in his hand glinted coldly in the sunlight, and his usually gentle eyes were burning with uncontrollable rage. The tip of the arrow exuded a chilling coldness. Shuizhengju was staring at me with dark, heavy eyes, the bow still drawn in his hand, aimed directly at me. My heart skipped a beat violently. I had seen those eyes before. They belonged to the scheming consort Shui, who had been locked in a life-and-death struggle with me, determined to destroy each other. Watching Cheng Yuanshu throw himself in front of me without a second thought to shield me, Shuizhengju slowly curved his lips into a smile and lowered his bow and arrow. "My archery skills are poor. I have offended your highness. I beg for your magnanimity and forgiveness." My hand, still clutching the torn half of the handkerchief, was cold to the bone. My heart sank like a stone. Just from that one sentence, I recognized him. Shuizhengju, consort Shui. He was back. The stinging pain in my ear still lingered, a reminder of how brazenly he had just offended me. I did not hesitate for a moment. "Guards, seize him." The guards looked hesitant, but upon hearing my order, they swarmed forward, pinning Shuizhengju to the ground without any resistance. Yet his eyes remained fixed on me, a strange, mocking smile playing on his lips. The commotion was so great that everyone in the hunting ground turned their attention to this side. A drop of blood fell onto my robe from my ear. Cheng Yuanshu's face paled drastically. He shielded me and escorted me back to the tent first. Summoning the imperial physician immediately, he hesitated to speak, wanting to ask several times, but closed his mouth when he saw my grim expression. After my wound had been treated, a eunuch from my imperial brother's side arrived with a message. Furious at Shuizhengju for daring to offend the princess so audaciously, my imperial brother had ordered him to be flogged 20 times, dismissed him from his official position temporarily, and confined him to his home for a month to reflect on his actions. With such an incident happening at the hunting ground, it was impossible to continue the hunt. I returned to the princess mansion early. Cheng Yuanshu followed me closely, his eyes fixed on me with a worried, puppy-like gaze. He did not dare to ask a single question along the way. It was not until we were alone in the room that he hesitated for a long time before tentatively asking, "Master Shui looked very strange today." "He is injured. Will your highness not go to see him?" Clearly, he was burning with jealousy. Looking listless and dejected, at the hunting ground, he had been so angry he had wanted to beat Shui Zhengju to a pulp himself, harboring a fierce desire to leave him bedridden for 10 days and a half. He had snarled at everyone, but now he was being unusually obedient and well-behaved. I lifted his chin with my hand. "See Shui Zhengju for what? The only person I want to see is my consort." "Is he my consort?" Cheng Yuanshu looked at me with his bright, clear eyes. "Who is qualified to be your consort depends solely on your highness's will, be it thunder or dew. It is all the grace of your highness." He was too upright and honest. It seemed as if even if I said I wanted to change my consort now, he would not utter a single word of refusal. Just like in those years when he had followed me in my past life, no matter how much he had hated Shui Zhengju, he had never once confessed his feelings to me, as if simply staying by my side was the only thing he had ever wanted. I felt a sudden urge to tease him, and deliberately said, "Then I'll go see him." Unexpectedly, I had only taken one step forward when the hem of my skirt was pulled. I turned around to find Cheng Yuanshu silently holding onto my skirt, his long eyelashes drooping down, casting a docile shadow under his eyes. He did not say a word, but he did not let go either. I was amused. "You don't want me to go?" Cheng Yuanshu fell silent for a moment, then finally relented, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Will your highness not go, please? Master Shui is fierce. Every time he sees me, he looks like he wants to tear me apart. I'm afraid of him." Only when I sat back down did Cheng Yuanshu finally let go of my skirt. "Your highness," he said, leaning his head on my lap, snitching on Shui Zhengju like a child. "He bullied me." Cheng Yuanshu was being unusually clingy today. It took me quite a while to coax him before he finally left contentedly. After the incident at the hunting ground, the gossip in the capital grew even more intense. Shui Zhengju had not yet recovered from the embarrassment of being rejected unrequitedly at the Shaanxi festival feast when he was suddenly plunged into another scandal involving the new favorite and the old flame. There was no shortage of people from wealthy, influential families who loved to gossip. In just a few days, the story had spread far and wide, and several storytellers in the tea houses had even adapted it into different versions of plays. But it was not long before word spread that some highly disrespectful materials had been found in those tea houses, and they had all been shut down. Even Shui Zhengju, who had been recuperating at home from his injuries, ran into trouble. He had been flogged, dismissed from his post, and confined to his home to reflect on his mistakes. Unfortunately, his servants had been negligent in their care at night, allowing several thieves to break into his house, for some reason. They had also ransacked the kitchen. The servants, not paying attention, had mixed up the medicinal herbs and boiled them together. The properties of the mixed herbs were incompatible with his original medicine. Now, Shui Zhengju was gravely ill. I was in the palace when I heard the news. I knew immediately who was behind it all. The young crown prince Shu Shishi was 10 years old this year. Taking advantage of his father's absence, he sidled up to me, caught sight of the miscellaneous book in my hand, and asked curiously, "The highest and brightest are the sun and moon, the closest yet farthest are husband and wife. Aunt, what does this mean?" I explained it to him. Shu Shishi looked half comprehending, then suddenly asked, "Is it like Master Shui and you, Aunt?" A child's innocence often made their words the most hurtful. A sharp pain squeezed my heart. I shook my head. If we had never been husband and wife, things would have escalated to the point of us being mortal enemies. That arrow shot at the hunting ground, no matter what Shui Zhengju's motives had been, whether he had aimed for me or Cheng Yuanshu, he deserved to die. Teacher and student in our youth, husband and wife in our prime, bitter foes until death. Love and hatred had stretched across 2 lifetimes. Now, only hatred remained. Shu Shishi fell silent for a long while. Just as I was about to leave the palace, he quietly handed me a box. He looked conflicted as he said, "This is something Master Shui gave me after the Shaanxi festival. He said it was a gift you gave him in the past, and it ought to be returned to its rightful owner. He said you refused to see him, so he asked me to pass it on." I lifted the lid to find a doublefish jade pendant inside. I had given this to him back when we were both studying at the Imperial Academy. In my past life, during a furious quarrel, Shui Zhengdu had smashed it to pieces in a fit of rage. Now, after all these twists and turns, it had somehow found its way back to me from Shui Zhengdu, who had not yet regained his memories of our past life. A broken mirror could never be mended. I picked up the jade pendant and, to Shu Shushi's astonishment, hurled it to the ground, just like the ending of our past life. It shattered into two halves. I took a deep breath. Neither the pendant nor the man is of any use to me anymore. Shu Shushi understood my meaning and never brought it up again in front of me. As for whether Shui Zhengdu lived or died, I did not care in the slightest. He had hated me with a vengeance in our past life, and I had hated him just as fiercely. From now on, it would be best if we never crossed paths again until we drew our last breaths. The gossip in the capital gradually died down as peaceful days passed. There was no imperial rule stating that a princess's consort could not serve in the court. My imperial brother noticed Cheng Yuanshu's talent and intended to promote him. Introducing him to important positions, he was swamped with work, yet he still made time to visit the princess mansion every chance he got. When he suddenly failed to show up one day, I found myself feeling strangely unaccustomed to his absence. I sent someone to inquire and learned that on his way back from the military camp outside the capital, he had been caught in a rainstorm. The horses in his entourage had panicked, and he had been injured while rescuing someone. He was taking shelter for the night in a desolate temple nearby. For some reason, an uneasy feeling gnawed at my heart. The temple was remote and had been uninhabited for a long time. I had no idea how badly he was hurt. I gathered a team of personal guards, brought along an imperial physician, and set off for the outskirts of the capital. The rain poured relentlessly that night. For the sake of speed, I traveled on horseback. By the time we neared the temple, it was already midnight. We only needed to pass through a dense forest to see the temple perched on the distant mountain top. My personal guards went ahead to scout. No sooner had they entered the forest than their expressions suddenly changed. "Your Highness, there are people." The silent night was filled only with the drumming of rain. Everything in sight blurred under the downpour. The darkness was absolute, and I could hear nothing but the thudding of my own heart, unsure of who lay ahead. I did not dare to proceed recklessly. I raised my hand. "Fall back, retreat from the forest at once." No sooner had the words left my mouth than a sharp, whistling sound cut through the air. The tip of an arrow sank deep into the trunk of a tree, its shaft still humming and trembling with the force of the impact. That archery skill, I knew it all too well. I had barely glanced at the arrow when sudden chaos erupted. Not far away, a personal guard shouted loudly, "Your Highness, run." Horses neighed in panic. The guard closest to me behind me suddenly reached out and wrapped his arms around my waist. The acrid smell of rain and blood filled my nostrils, and the soaked black narrow sleeves of his robe were stained with blood. He half dragged me off my horse, overwhelmed by a sense of suffocation. I pulled the dagger hidden in my sleeve and stabbed backward fiercely. The attacker grunted in pain, his grip loosening, but he clung to me desperately, refusing to let go. His foot slipped, and he tumbled down the hillside with me in tow. The hillside was muddy and slippery, the rain making the tree trunks treacherous to grip. The dagger sliced my neck during the struggle. The man froze in alarm, then grabbed the blade of the dagger with his bare hand. We finally came to a stop when our backs slammed hard against a tree trunk. I lay sprawled in the mud, coughing up blood. I forced myself to stand despite the searing pain, and finally got a clear look at the man. It was Shui Zhengdu. Half his face was hidden in the shadows of the tree, his expression cold and terrifying. His hands were covered in blood, impossible to tell whose. He looked nothing like the man I had first seen after my rebirth. Shui Zhengdu dropped the blood-stained dagger in a panic. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to see you." After 2 lifetimes apart, this was our first meeting since our rebirth, excluding the shocking incident at the hunting ground. We stood frozen, just a few feet apart, locked in a tense stalemate. Movement echoed from above, and torchlight flickered in the distance. My personal guards were closing in. I took a step back, feeling nothing but disgust at the sight of his face. 10 years of silence between us, endless quarrels every day. You begged me to let you go. In this life, I never once sought you out. Why are you still haunting me? During our worst quarrels, He had smashed every teacup and plate on the table. Xue Zhengju had broken down completely, his voice hoarse with rage as he shouted, "The marriage alliance was a matter of necessity. It was all so many years ago. You're alive and back now, why can't you just let it go?" I slapped him hard across the face, my hand trembling with the force of my blow, utterly disbelieving that he could say such a thing. In the end, the arriving guards pinned Xue Zhengju to his knees before me, but he stared up at me coldly. Knowing exactly what words would pierce my heart the deepest, he said, "You refused to let me go. If I could go back in time, I would rather you had died in the northern desert and never returned." That night, I had despaired and set fire to myself. His face turned ashen in the rain, clearly recalling the painful, extreme memories of that time. He stepped closer, suddenly grabbing my wrists, his voice filled with despair. "I thought I hated you, but after you died, I realized I was just using hatred to hide my guilt, because I didn't know how to face it. We were husband and wife once. Princess, you still love me, don't you? Why did you choose that Cheng Yuanshu instead?" I struggled to free my wrists, raising my hand to slap him again, to make him come to his senses. But Xue Zhengju seemed to have anticipated my move, catching my hand mid-air, his expression bordered on madness. "Kangol, I never loved her at all, from beginning to end. The only one I've ever loved is you." The glow of torches drew near. The moment he lunged at me, a gust of wind rushed at me from behind. Cheng Yuanshu kicked Xue Zhengju away with a single blow, then steadied me firmly in his arms. His expression was dark and menacing, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're asking for death." I did not stop him. By the time we dragged Xue Zhengju back to the temple, he was completely drained of strength to resist. After everything that had happened, no one could deny that he had been the mastermind behind tonight's incident. Even the soldiers under Cheng Yuanshu's command loathed him. Refusing to spare him a single glance, he was thrown into a corner like a dead dog. The imperial physician I had brought was kept busy, tending to my wounds first before turning to Cheng Yuanshu. He had already been injured, and rushing through the rainstorm to fight Xue Zhengju had only made things worse. His wounds had become swollen and pale from being soaked, and he was now grimacing in pain, gritting his teeth to keep from crying out. I rested my chin in my hand and asked him, "Does it hurt?" His lips were ashen, but he shook his head. "No, it doesn't hurt." I laughed when I heard that. "Then let's talk about all the things you've been hiding from me." He knew martial arts. Yet he had always pretended to know only the basics. He had repeatedly let himself be bullied and victimized by Xue Zhengju without fighting back, then run to me to complain and play the victim. But just now, Xue Zhengju had been completely helpless against him. Cheng Yuanshu trembled, his voice growing softer and softer until he finally lost all confidence. I thought he was going to apologize, but instead, he said, "Actually, it does hurt a lot." Xue Zhengju let out a cold laugh from the corner. He gasped for breath, half dead, with everything exposed and laid bare. He had nothing left to lose. "I'm not the only one at fault. Cheng Yuanshu is no saint either. He's nothing but a shameless wretch who spends his days pretending to be pitiful and seducing other men's wives." Cheng Yuanshu was stunned speechless. He had never been insulted like this in either of his lifetimes, especially not in front of me. Furious, he shot back, "Who the princess likes is who will be her consort. You're just bitter because you can't have her. You're just unlucky." The noise of their bickering made my ears ache. After all, Xue Zhengju was still a court official. No matter how deserving he was of death, it would not do to kill him outright. We spent the night in the temple before finally returning to the capital with Xue Zhengju bound hand and foot. The carriage jolted along the road, the wound on my neck throbbed with pain. Cheng Yuanshu leaned over to examine it carefully, his movements gentle and cautious. I suddenly asked, "You heard what he said, didn't you? Our wedding day is drawing near. Before that day comes, you still have a chance to back out." Talk of ghosts and reincarnation was too bizarre and sensational for anyone to believe. Besides, I had returned from a marriage alliance in the northern desert, been married to Xue Zhengju for 10 years in my past life, and died once already. He was 5 years younger than me, only 22 this year. In the prime of his life, he had already wasted an entire lifetime on me. I did not want to tie him down and make him waste a second lifetime for me, but instead of answering my question, He leaned closer to me, his eyes as bright as ever, as if I were the only person in the entire world. Then in our past life, after you were gone, did I avenge you? A wave of bitterness welled up in my nose, and my eyes reddened with tears. No, but he had stayed by my side. Walking with me all the way to the underworld, my voice came out hoarse. You died with me, you sacrificed yourself for me. Cheng Yuanshu blinked, then leaned in to kiss my lips softly. He said, I want to thank my past self, for exchanging his life for the chance to be chosen by you in this lifetime. My imperial brother summoned me to the palace to ask about the incident with Xue Zhengju. I could not very well tell him the real reason why Xue Zhengju had seemed like a completely different person. Cheng Yuanshu quickly made up an excuse, lying through his teeth without batting an eyelid. Master Xue has loved your highness for a long time, but he always felt he was unworthy of you, so he deliberately belittled you, rejecting you at the feast that day to make himself seem unattainable, hoping to pique your interest. It wasn't until he realized that your highness had chosen this humble servant that he dropped the pretense. The excuse was clumsy and absurd, but it just so happened that this was exactly how the popular storytellers in the capital had portrayed it in their tales. My imperial brother's face lit up with sudden understanding. He even glanced at Cheng Yuanshu with curiosity, hesitation written all over his face. I could guess what he was thinking. Was Cheng Yuanshu also like the characters in the storybooks, who had won Princess Nanyang's sympathy with his tears and charmed his way into becoming her consort? Fortunately, my imperial brother's curiosity did not go that far. He cleared his throat and assumed a solemn expression. He could not tolerate having someone like Xue Zhengju remaining in the court, especially not someone who was responsible for teaching the young crown prince. Taking this opportunity, he demoted Xue Zhengju to a remote, barren region, to preserve the royal family's reputation. The official announcement stated only that Xue Zhengju was being promoted, sent to serve in a regional post first, and would be recalled to the capital once he had achieved notable accomplishments. But when that recall would happen, how many years from now, was anyone's guess. When the imperial edict was issued, the entire court erupted in an uproar. The gifts of condolence from his former colleagues poured into the Xue mansion. On the surface, these gifts celebrated his promotion by His Majesty. In reality, they were all the unwanted odds and ends that officials had rummaged up from their homes. Everyone knew he had thoroughly incurred the emperor's wrath, and would soon be chased out of the capital with his entire family to live in the countryside. In just a few days, he fell from the heights of glory to the depths of despair, enduring nothing but cold, disdainful stares. Yet even at such a time, Xue Zhengju still deluded himself that there was room for redemption, that he could return to the capital someday. Instead of feeling the least bit anxious, he showed up at the princess mansion. I heard the report and, worried that Cheng Yuanshu might be at a disadvantage against Xue Zhengju, quickly washed up and hurried over, only to find my concern was completely unnecessary. Xue Zhengju sat drinking tea, while Cheng Yuanshu lingered beside him, muttering under his breath with a faint smile, "Drink your fill, Master Xue. This is the finest tea specially sourced for me by Her Highness. Once you leave the capital, you'll never get to taste anything this good again." His words turned Xue Zhengju's face ashen. The tea in his mouth stuck in his throat, impossible to swallow. Humiliated and unwilling to concede defeat, Xue Zhengju picked at Cheng Yuanshu's attire, all brawn and no brains. A white robe ought to be embroidered with green bamboo, not this pale moonwhite, which makes you look like some playboy from a brothel. Cheng Yuanshu did not get angry. Instead, he smiled brightly, a hint of pride in his eyes. He said it openly and unapologetically, "Her Highness loves me just the way I am. I'm young, I look good in anything I wear. Unlike you, who's so old and decrepit, not even a dog would bother to gnaw on you." After just a few rounds of this, Xue Zhengju was practically foaming at the mouth, ready to throw a punch and start another fight with him. I stood outside the door, watching Cheng Yuanshu's triumphant display with amusement for a moment, before finally pushing the door open and stepping inside. At the sight of me, Cheng Yuanshu immediately wiped the smile off his face. He took a small sip of tea, looked up at me, and blinked slowly. "Your Highness, is this tea really that bad? I think Master Xue is wrong." Everything given to me by your highness is precious beyond measure. Shui Zhengdu could contain himself no longer, his face contorting with rage. You bastard with the surname Cheng, I swear I'll beat you to death today. I stepped forward without hesitation, standing expressionlessly in front of Cheng Yuanshu to shield him. Shui Zhengdu forced himself to hold back. He was no longer the rising star he had once been. Not only could he not afford to offend me, but Cheng Yuanshu was now a rising noble in the court, someone he dared not cross. He pulled something out of his bosom and held it out to me. It was the double-fish jade pendant, its broken pieces glued together with gold foil, the cracks still glaringly obvious. When I saw it, I suddenly burst out laughing. What a ridiculous, absurd scene this was. In my past life, he had smashed it to pieces with his own hands, breaking my heart in the process. Yet I had still gone out of my way to find someone to repair it, treasuring it carefully in my room until it was reduced to ashes along with me in the fire. And now, in this life, the jade pendant I had shattered, he had mended it in the exact same way, personally bringing it to me, begging me to take him back. The mistakes one makes, the sins one commits, they will always come back to haunt you in the end. Fortunately, I had finally woken up from my delusion, no longer willing to torment myself. Shui Zhengdu humbled himself, groveling and fawning over me in a way he never had before. When you were 15, you were still such a young girl. Your eyes were clearer than lake water, shining bright as stars. You stood out from everyone else. You were the most dazzling pearl in the entire capital. That was the year you gave me this double-fish jade pendant. At 15, I had truly loved him. But a broken mirror can never be made whole again, just like this jade pendant. It would forever bear the scars of its cracks. Every time I looked at it, I would remember how I had knelt on the ground, choking back tears, picking up the shards one by one, holding them in my arms and staying awake all night long. I reached out and took the jade pendant. Cheng Yuanshu opened his mouth, as if to say something. Then, to their utter astonishment, I released my grip, already broken once. The jade pendant had become incredibly fragile, this time. It could not withstand even the slightest fall. It hit the ground and shattered completely, into pieces too small to ever be put back together again. No, Shui Zhengdu's eyes widened in horror, watching as the cherished token of his memories crumbled into dust before his very eyes. Tears streamed down his face, his entire body trembling violently. He threw all decorum aside, dropping to his knees on the floor, stretching out his hands in a desperate attempt to gather the tiny fragments into his palms. But the more frantic he became, the more scattered the pieces grew. In the end, they were blown away by the wind, mingling with his tears and disappearing without a trace. Shui Zhengdu laughed through his tears, half mad with grief. You do love me, don't you? The jade pendant is broken, but I can make another one. It will be whole again. I'll make it whole again. I stared at him coldly, then crushed the last remaining piece under my foot. With the crisp sound of breaking jade, Shui Zhengdu's sanity finally snapped completely. He collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, his cries echoing through the room. I took Cheng Yuanshu's hand and walked away, never once looking back at the man I had loved and lost in my youth. From this day forward, this name would no longer represent hidden pain and unfulfilled longing in my memories, only liberation. Shui Zhengdu was driven out of the capital, Cheng Yuanshu and I finally fulfilled the regrets of 2 lifetimes, making our dreams come true at last. On our wedding day, red silk ribbons hung high everywhere, and countless guests gathered to witness our union. My imperial brother personally served as the officiant, bringing the young crown prince with him, watching as I married the man I had truly wanted to spend my life with. When I had gone to the northern desert for the marriage alliance, I had traveled alone, braving the bitter cold that even the campfires could not dispel, with my family and friends thousands of miles away. Now, they were all by my side, sharing in my joy and happiness. Our matchmaker was an elderly noble lady from a marquis's mansion, her head full of silver hair, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. When your highness left us at such a young age, you even went out of your way to beg the emperor for a decree to let my worthless granddaughter marry the man she loved, while you yourself were forced to go to that terrible place. Now, at long last, all your wishes have come true. You've married the man you love. May you be blessed with endless happiness and a lifetime of love and harmony together. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, feeling as if I were looking at a stranger from a past life. A maid suddenly leaned in close, whispering the news to me softly. Shui Zhengju was dead. He had left the capital a few days earlier, but he had shown up again today, on the very day when all the noble ladies were required to come and celebrate my wedding. Ever since I had returned to the capital, Kangol had been too ashamed to show her face. Fearing that I and my imperial brother would take revenge on her, she had hidden herself away in the inner quarters, never venturing out for all these years until today, when she had no choice but to attend. Shui Zhengju had waited until she stepped down from her carriage, then stabbed her to death with a single blow. When he was arrested by the imperial guards, he did not resist at all. He only knelt before my imperial brother, begging him to pass a message on to me. All my enemies are dead, all my grievances are settled. I hope that from now on, you will never meet anyone like me again. The room fell completely silent, no one daring to say a single word. I calmly picked up my red wedding veil and placed it over my head, listening to the joyous sound of gongs and drums echoing from outside. My true love was here to take me away. The elderly lady quickly recovered from her shock, hurrying to gather everyone around and get the wedding ceremony started. The deaths of Shui Zhengju and Kangol did not disturb anyone. They faded away quietly, swallowed up by the joyous celebration of the day, beneath the bright wedding candles. Surrounded by 10 miles of red bridal procession, I welcomed my true happiness at long last.